All right, guys, welcome to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Orick, with my partner, Sean Williams, who is calling from an actual studio that's got people in it for a change. So much
Yeah,
social distancing.
yeah. Well, politics knows no social distancing.
Tell me
Anyway,
about it.
we're getting everything's getting lined up to make a run at it Friday. Everybody's making some last minute details and what have you. Hope everybody else is getting to get back to work and do their thing and be a functional, productive citizen once again. Thank you guys for joining us on Under the Dome tonight. We want to thank you guys for being with us as always, and invite you guys to subscribe to our show on iTunes and on YouTube, and follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. Our Twitter handles are right there as you see, and away we go.
All right, guys. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight, the schedule dropped off for the Saints last Thursday night. Of course, ESPN does a 3-hour special, but it was all over Twitter by 5 o'clock, so there was no point in even watching the special. So I guess the question tonight I have is, what do you consider the hardest stretch of games in the 2020 schedule? We're going to look at, week by week, but in 2017 and 2018, we saw a 7 and 9 game winning streak happen. And because of that winning streak, that propelled those teams into winning 11 and 13 games respectively. So my question then for you guys is, where do you see a similar winning streak start up on this schedule? And what would be the hardest stretch of games right now for the Saints to go through?
To be honest with you, I do not. I've made a copy of the schedule, and I do not have it sitting here in front of me at this point in time. But I've always believed. I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago we had that absolutely brutal stretch at the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I've always believed, with the exception of maybe that season, that the most important stretch of games is the first 4, because you set the tone for your entire season in those 4 games.
Well, the first 4 games this year are Tampa Bay. We open, Las Vegas Raiders, not LA, LV Raiders Stadium. Then you host the Packers. Then you go to Detroit. So, to me, the very first game is the most important game of the season, because you go head to head with Tom Brady. Now you're home, so that's the good news. But that's going to be America's Game of the Week on Fox. So you get Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. But I mean, if as a prognosticators think, if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are supposed to be the biggest threat to the Saints division title, you got to take them out first week.
Absolutely. And make them have to catch up to you the entire rest of the way.
Exactly.
And we all know the adage about what happens when the Saints open the season with a win. As rarely as it happens, has happened.
I had the schedule. Let me see something here. I had it pulled up earlier. That's not what I wanted. Okay, no big deal. I'll do the math later. I thought I had their record on opening day, but I don't have it. It's not good. Even under Jim Moore, even under Sean Payton, it's still not good.
I think I want to say the last time that I heard anything about it was something like only 5 times under Payton, if that many. They opened this season with a win.
Right. Um, I don't believe they've had an opening day win since 2013. I think that was the last opening day win they had. I
Atlanta.
don't. Oh yeah, in 2013 against Atlanta. Let me see. I don't think they won opening weekend in 2019. Yeah, they did.
No, we opened the season last year with win
Good
over
win. You're
Houston.
right. You're right. So it was the first time we won since 2013. So
Yeah.
never mind. Never mind. I was trying to calculate the winnings, the record, opening day record, and I thought I had it before. It's really, really ugly though.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Well, you had for decades. I'm telling you. I think during the Meekum years, I think the Saints have only won 2 opening day games under John when John Meekum was the owner. I think after that, Jim Moore had a good stretch until 1993, and then it all kind of fell off after that. So
Yeah, the wheels absolutely fell off of it after
yeah,
Mora left.
yep. And then after that, Jim Haslett, I think, had 1 or 2 opening day wins, not in 2000, and then it came. So it has not been good. It has not
Yeah.
been good. So that's a killer game. Okay, so the rest of the schedule, we have a bye week 6. We host the Chargers, then we host the Panthers, go to Chicago, then November 8th, the second weekend of November for NBC Sunday Night Football. We play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that once again, that's a major game, nationally televised game.
Yes.
To me, this is the tough stretch that happens because we're talking about from the Sunday night game on the road. You have after that you host the 49ers, you host the Falcons, and you go to Denver. You have not beaten Denver since a meaningless game at the end of the 95 season, I believe maybe 94 season, when Hugh Millen was the quarterback for the Denver Broncos against Jim Everett and the Saints. Then after that, so I mean, I know Peyton hasn't won out there, and we have not done well against Denver in the 2000s. We lost.
I can remember, if I remember correctly, the last game that we played Denver was that debacle where
Yes.
the blocked kick or
Mhm.
or something. Oh man.
Since 2000, we played Denver in New Orleans in 2000. That was Aaron Brooks' first start at home. And Brooks had over 400 yards passing and 100 yards rushing in a loss. Then we played him again in 2008, and they destroyed us. That was against Jay Cutler. Then we played him in 2012. That was Peyton Manning taking us apart. And then we played him in 2016 because we play him every 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the blocked extra point. They returned for 2 points that they really went out of bounds. So,
yeah.
So Denver's a house of horrors, especially playing in Denver. And it begins a 3-game road trip because they play at Denver, at Atlanta, and then at Philadelphia. And with Atlanta and Philadelphia, you don't know what kind of team you're going to have by those first 2 weekends in December. Then you come home for Kansas City.
Yeah.
Then you play the Vikings Christmas Day, and you wind up the season in Carolina. So to me, if you're going to have a winning streak, you got to have that winning streak all the way to Sunday, November 15th. That's got to be your winning streak. You got to be 7-0 or 8-0. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, you have to be 8-0 going to the host the 49ers.
Yes.
That's how I look at it. And in that 8-0 stretch, you got to sweep the Bucks.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're talking about a rough
Yeah.
swath of games, and the rest of the games. I mean, yeah, those 3 road games, you've got to go 2-1 or 3-0 in those games. Kansas City, if you lose to Kansas City, it doesn't hurt you that badly because while it affects your overall record, it's an AFC loss is bad.
Yeah.
But I mean that's tough. That's to me that's the toughest stretch.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Of course, you want to win everyone that you can, but as you alluded to, it's going to be a lot. It's going to favor them a lot more if they have to lose to do it to AFC teams rather than to other NFC teams, because that's how they for those who don't know, that's how they figure the playoff berths.
Yep, absolutely. Um, okay, so I'm giving everybody an update of what's going on, so they don't have to. So they understand where the noise is coming from.
Oh, that is probably interesting. Once again, I want to let everybody know that I haven't quite done my homework to figure out how to do the live chat and all this. And as you can see, my phone is my camera and monitor and everything else. So I'll be back with you guys as soon as I can.
Okay. Anyway, so to me, I saw Calvin's comment. Tampa's going 5-11. Yeah, I said it. I would love it. Personally, I don't want to wish injury on somebody, but to me, if Tom Brady, who's been remarkably healthy for his entire time in Tampa, in New England, if he were to get hurt in Tampa, that would just be too funny because Tampa, of course, that is the place where Florida is the place where all the old retirees go anyway. But to have all this excitement, all this hype about Tom Brady coming back and Tom Brady going to finally get them to the playoffs, to have him get hurt or show that he's an old man, that would be entertaining.
Well, obviously, a lot of this is yet to be determined and yet to be seen just exactly how it's going to play out. Not just with all the new players and what have you that they've acquired, but also with the way that this global pandemic is going to affect not just the Buccaneers, but all teams. So you don't really know with a team that has had that much turnover, not the least of which is going to be their franchise quarterback. To see how that's going to affect them is going to be interesting. But it's funny that you mentioned that because I was thinking about that the other day. What if what happened to Breeze last year happened to Brady this year?
And if Ryan Griffin is going to be the number one backup, be entertaining because that's all the hype about Tampa, and I read online that Tampa tickets and I think it was Raiders tickets are the hottest tickets right now in the league, and the Patriots actually are seeing a decrease in tickets. So much for bandwagon fans.
Yeah, they all traded in their red, white, and blue for those digital alarm clock uniforms. Of course, I know they redesigned the uniforms. I'm being facetious.
Redesigned. They went back to 2002. My brother, don't talk about Del Boca Vista like that. I tell you what, my favorite, the secret genius behind Seinfeld, Jerry Stiller passed away
Yeah.
yesterday, and I was really looking for the best of Frank Costanza. And boy, that somebody yanked that clip, and I was upset because it had all my favorite clips in it. I tried finding other ones, and the other ones went on way too long. But
Yeah.
the clip where he calls Jerry's dad and goes, "This is Frank Costanza. We're moving into Day Boca Vista, lock, stock, and barrel. We're in the shuffleboard. We'll be in the pool. We're going to be all over that clubhouse. And I dare you to keep me out." Oh, man, I love Frank Costanza.
We were talking about this at lunch today. Just exactly how many of the people that we've loved and admired, entertainment and every other aspect of life, how many we've lost this year, because Little Richard died last week too.
Yes.
And that's probably Little Richard was probably my biggest musical influence in a lot of ways. The ultimate. You want to know where Prince came from? Go back and watch footage
Oh,
of
yeah.
Little Richard when he performed as a young man. Uh, it just broke my heart.
Yep. And it's funny because I looked it up. Little Richard was 15 years old when he started.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a second wave of popularity. You remember in the 80s, the Taco Bell commercials with Little Richard?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he had that second wave of popularity where his songs started coming out. I have an album. Oh, geez. Jive Bunny and the Master Mixers. Okay. And what they were
Yep.
doing was they were all kinds of stuff where they mixed Little Richard. They had a 50s mix. And you heard Tutti Frutti and,
Which
all
was
his.
kind of a second time rehash of something from when I was a teenager called Stars on Long Play.
Right. Stars on
They
45.
did
Yeah,
they
Stars on
did the Beatles
45.
mix.
Yep. Yep. I've got old Jive Bunny and the Master Mixes. I still have that CD.
Yeah.
Long Tall Sally. Yep, absolutely. Good golly,
Good
Miss
golly, Miss
Molly.
Molly. Lucille. Yeah, we used to do in a band that I played in years ago. We did this sort of a medley of like 3 or 4 Little Richard songs.
I got a big kick out of going back to Frank Costanza. Talking about Little Richard, but Frank Costanza as well, because Frank Costanza was he had whenever Saints fans get all upset about a player or something like that, I think about that episode with George Costanza. They thought he had died. So so this is when he's working for the Yankees. So Steinbrenner comes to visit George's parents to console him, and he's trying to tell him about it. And all Frank is sitting there just shaking his head. He goes, "What the hell did you trade Jay Bruner for? And got a rocket of an arm. You don't know what the hell you're doing." And I think about that all the time because when you listen to Saints fans on the radio and on social media, that's exactly what they say, and that kind of me into getting into the departure of Larry Warford, because there's an enormous between how Saints fans view Larry Warford and Andres Pete versus how the Saints view them.
Yeah.
So when the Saints released Larry Warford, I watched Saints social media, specifically on Twitter, do a complete meltdown, just like Frank Costanza with Sean Payton releasing Larry Warford. And they're pulling up Pro Football Focus stats, and basically they were like George Costanza, Frank Costanza. You don't know what the hell you're doing. How do you interpret this?
In 4 years, you had a 3-time Pro Bowl.
Yep.
Folks, you have to remember rule number one. This is a business. It's all about the money. You you buy low, you sell high. You
Mm-hmm.
tried to not only do I believe firmly that Peyton was trying to do the best that he could by Warford because he knows this is the end of the guy's career. And the chances of him being able to catch on with another team are much higher now than they would be for him to toil away and then be with the team until that last cut. But there again, I can't stress enough. You had the guy for 4 years, and 3 of them were Pro Bowl years, and there's a purpose that you drafted the kid first round this year that you did, and I mean, it it didn't surprise me at all.
Well, and I read a lot of stuff from the Saints coaches, and that's the thing. I try and get across to people when they get frustrated with the Saints or they start quoting Sean Payton. I'm like, Sean Payton on one hand tells you exactly what he's going to do, but at the same time, you have to watch their actions to see. Oh yeah, Sean Payton was telling us what he was going to do. Sean Payton specifically addressed the interior of the line. He was disappointed in the quality of play in the interior of the line. And people automatically went to, well, that's Andres Pete. Andres Pete's
Yeah.
the problem. And once he's out of there, we don't have to worry about it. And they
Look at it
re-signed.
legitimate. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, they re-signed Andres Pete. And they gave him $33 million guaranteed. Now, Nick Underhill has a great article about why Pete was brought back. And a lot of it has to do with his versatility. He can play every position on the line except
And
for
he's
center.
younger.
And he's younger. And he's faster. That doesn't excuse the fact that he's injured all the time.
Now this is gonna be a pivotal year in regards to that because the guy is going to have to prove himself worthy of the contract they gave him, and he's not going to be able to because I mean you look at the narrative that's surrounding Teron Armstead right now. Obviously, when healthy, one of if not the best left tackles in the league. But the narrative around him is, man, if he can't stay healthy, why don't we get somebody else?
Exactly.
And that's going to be the same thing that you're going to start hearing more and more of on Andres Pete as we progress through this season, if it turns out the same way that it has in recent memory.
Exactly. So it's one of these things that so you're bringing back Pete because he gives you that versatility. That means you can keep fewer offensive linemen. Even though he gets hurt, you can keep fewer offensive linemen because you've got another problem with your left tackle, Armstead, always being hurt. Pete can play left tackle. He's not that great at it, but he can play it. And he's better than anybody else they can find that could play left tackle, barring a draft. So then your decision was, I've got $12 million tied into a player like Warford. I was frustrated with him because he was out of shape, out of condition, and the Saints offensive line demands that they're able to pull, trap, and run sweeps. Warford was the slowest guy in that group. You look at that Vikings game, the pivotal play of that game is immediately after you saw basically Taysom Hill take over the game. He runs that big run on a sweep to the left side. He gets down in the red zone. The next thing that happens is on the very next play, Danielle Hunter cuts to the inside on Ramczyk. I forgot who the defensive tackle is for the Vikings, but let's just say defensive tackle for the Vikings player goes at Warford. Warford is like he's back on skates. Hunter ram check to the inside, gets to Pete, knocks the ball loose, the fumble, Vikings recover, and the momentum. We score on that drive, we probably take the lead, we probably win that ball game. So you're looking at a guy all season long. You've been frustrated with his play because you've been telling him you've got to get in condition. You've got to get faster. You've got to get faster. He's not going to get any faster. He's 29 years old. Okay. So you draft a guy, Ruiz, who is the best center on the board. He can play guard. McCoy, who is your center, who you are very happy with, can play guard as well. So that's the logical place where you can save money and you can place a younger, more athletic player at your right guard position next to your best offensive lineman, your right tackle, Ryan Ramczyk.
Yeah, and as we've pointed out before, I don't know the exact figure, but the Saints, by cutting Warford pre-June 1st, they saved something in the neighborhood of $8 to $10 million towards the cap, which is like a minor detail.
Yeah, exactly. So now you're talking about you want to pay. You guys know we got to pay players like Kamara, Ramczyk, and Lattimore. Now Ramczyk and Lattimore, we picked up the 5th-year option, so you can really wait 2 years to pay these guys. You don't have to pay them right away. But Kamara is a free agent after this year. So that $8 million gives you the cushion that you could probably pay Kamara before this season starts, much like you paid Michael Thomas before this season starts.
Yes, I agree. And I fully expect it to happen, especially now with Warford being cut and that money being saved.
Exactly. So, that's really how you have to look at it, because you were going to have to pay somebody to play in Pete's spot. You were going to have to pay something. So with Pete, you at least got, and this is another thing you brought up that should be remembered. There's no OTAs. There's no mini camps. We don't even know if training camp's going to start on time. We're assuming it will, but we don't know if it's going to start on time. So you've got those issues going on. So the best thing you can do is keep guys who already know your system. Keep them in their spot.
Exactly. That's going to be crucial there again. Like I said earlier about Tampa Bay, that's going to be crucial for all teams in the league, because you're not going to have that prep time that you have had every year before. You're looking at a very realistic possibility that the NFL season, at best, could be played with only 4 months to prepare for, 4 weeks of training camp to prepare for, and an abbreviated preseason.
And here's the thing, too. California announced today that they're talking about going all the way to September shut down. Louisiana, which is the reason why you got so much noise in there right now, Louisiana is going to start phase 1 of reopening, okay? I go back to work on Monday. You go back to work on Friday, okay? Yeah. If California is not even looking at doing a reopening until September, that affects the NFL, because that means no games for the 49ers, for the Chargers, or for the Rams. How are you going to do preseason? How are you going to do training camp? Those are all realistic questions that are going to have to be answered. And it's a political question, not so much a economic question as far as football is concerned.
And
Then,
I mean, when you get in these owners' pocketbooks, and I mean, I would I would shudder to know the actual figures of what these owners make in just one game. But you start talking about a 4 game stretch where they don't get any gate, they don't get any merchandising. You basically play in a season of controlled scrimmages. That's going to hurt a lot of people, man.
I agree. I agree because you look at teams like look at the Chargers, for example. They've got a brand new quarterback. I I think that the Chargers are a good example of a team that needs a lot of practice time. They need those preseason games to see if this player can help us. If he's ready to play. Because otherwise, they're going to go out there starting because they don't have Philip Rivers anymore. They're going to go out there starting an old veteran. Are you trying to use a Jedi mind trick on me?
No, no, no.
I just saw your hand go across the screen like that. I'm like, are you trying to do a Jedi mind trick? What's that about? Okay.
Just smile and wave, boys.
I got you. So anyway, yeah, that's a team that's going to need the practice time. Teams like Tampa Bay are going to need that time. Tom Brady's got to learn this offense. Granted, he's a veteran. He can learn it. But he's got to get his timing down with receivers. All the things we talked about last week. New head coaches. They need time to implement their system. So, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting off season to see how you incorporate all this stuff.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So, anyway, I guess my question to you is, now that Warford's gone, where do you see Ruiz playing and where do you see McCoy playing?
I think, just my personal opinion, and I have absolutely no insight as far as hearing this interview or that interview in regards to this. I would think that the center position is crucial enough that you don't want to turn over a player there unless you just absolutely have no choice. So I would tend to believe that Ruiz is more of an answer at guard than he is at center. But there again, once they get into camp, once they start working, and once they see exactly what they have and exactly how Ruiz is going to adjust to the professional game, that that could be absolutely the opposite way.
I think so. I mean,
I guess that's a long way of saying that it's going to depend entirely on the adaptability of Ruiz himself.
I personally think that Ruiz comes into play center. I think they trust McCoy enough to play left guard. I don't think they would trust Ruiz to come in and play left guard. I think they look at somebody like McCoy as, okay, you had a year in the system, the offense. We can put you next to, and this is, I think, where they want to put him anyway, but we can put you next to Ramczyk. We can run off that side because you're one of the faster offensive linemen. And Ruiz, they like him as an anchor, that big plug in the middle. It's an easier transition for him considering he comes from Michigan. He played center at Michigan. He played in pro-style offense. It's easier to put him in at center where he's the most comfortable and he can make the calls. He's got McCoy there to help him. That's probably your best thing to do, given the lack of preparation you have to, get ready for the season, become a pro.
Yeah. And putting a rookie by next to Ryan Ramczyk, that's going to cover up a lot of insufficiencies at first, and allow a lot more adjustability to Ruiz.
Yeah, I mean, I just look at the size of the guy, and I think he's a good fit for the middle of that defense. Middle of that offensive line.
I agree completely.
Okay, so if the Saints use this money to bring in a free agent, what free agents can you see them bring in, if any?
Maybe another linebacker, maybe another defensive back. Those are the two need. Well, I would let me reverse that. I could say cornerback first, and then linebacker, maybe wide receiver. It's just going to depend a lot on what's available, what's out there to pursue.
Yeah, one of the guys I mentioned off the air, I thought Eli Apple would be a good bring back, as that outside cornerback, especially because
outside the stadium, right?
Yeah, because you really don't have anybody strong to play the outside of Lattimore and Jenkins. You kind of want to bring
that there again. If you can get that first Eli Apple that we had,
yeah,
that would suffice. But if you get that absolutely brutalized and gun shy Eli Apple that lost his composure, lost his cool, and then that's going to be an issue.
You what about? Oh, here we go. I threw this up. I don't know if you can see this or not. I'm flashing up some of the comments in the live chat so everybody can see it. The Saints signed Michael Burton from the Bears as the fullback, but talking about the Stenner kid with Baltimore to play fullback. I think.
Are we talking Stenner or Zenner?
Is it Zenner?
There was one that came out in the draft from like North Dakota State a year or two ago. Zach Zenner. Is that who he's talking about?
I'm gonna do a deep dive right now. We had him on the team last year.
I think so. Yeah, briefly, but
I don't. I see a Patrick Ricard that was on the Ravens. I have to go do a deep dive on that one. I'm not sure, but anyway,
I want to say that if he was with the Ravens, it was early, and when he was cut by the Ravens for whatever reason, then we got him. I think is what the deal was.
Rick Stenner, the wrestler's son.
Steiner.
Okay, Steiner.
Okay. Okay. I didn't even realize that he had a son playing. I need to get into my research more, don't
I? Well, I mean, a fullback is important.
Yes. Yeah. Especially when you don't have one.
Yeah, Zach Zenner, we had him last year, Chad, and we let him go. He came from Detroit, if I remember right.
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
We brought him into Detroit. Burton is the guy they brought in from the Bears. I think he was on the team last year, and he got cut at the end of training camp. But the fullback issue is a big problem, because if you look at this offense, what we like to have is a fullback who can play the H-back role. Essentially, he can come in and play a tight end. He can come in and block a game. He's a short yardage guy, and he has to be able to run that little wheel route out of the backfield to or the little out route out of the backfield so Peyton can so Breeze can hit him with a pass because you send everybody out and all go and you got the little back swinging out. We like that matchup, especially in the red zone. So,
in other words, the Taysom Hill role.
Yes. A 4-4 fullback that blocks and catches out of the backfield, built just like his dad. Hey, man, that sounds good to me. I'll tell you what.
If he's built like his dad, sign him now.
But yeah, that's one guy. Eli Apple is another guy, I think. Yeah, he says Calvin must have done the research. He says his name is Bronson Reichsteiner. I like this name. You got a guy named Bronson. I'm thinking Paul Kersey right away. Charles Bronson, Death Wish.
Well, they shortened their names, obviously, kind of like a stage name for wrestling. I thought their original name was Rick Steiner, Rob Rick Steiner.
That's
and
probably it.
His brother, the Roid Rage Freak. Man, he had an absolute meltdown on a live TV taping one night.
Did he really?
They had to clear the locker room to detain him in the middle of the ring. I thought he was fixing to have a heart attack.
Man, like I said, you got the wrong Ulrich brother up here for talking about wrestling because my brother was in here for a little while. You got to get my brother on here, do a special show.
Yes, I can do that now.
Because he could talk wrestling. I mean, I think he still has the first couple of WrestleManias on VHS tape. He used to have a nice collection of that stuff.
Yeah, and they came, most VHS tapes came in the little tight package.
Yeah.
The boxes. Well, the original WrestleManias came in this great big black box that had a big wide lip on it. And the very first one had Hulk Hogan and Mr. T on the cover.
And like I said, mine is the one that knows it better than I do. There he is. I got a story. Speaking of which,
the Roid Freak, just he would come in the ring and he'd tell him that, holla if you hear me, it's your big bad booty daddy.
My brother, like I said, he was always into wrestling. My dad used to watch it with him. I watched the old Mid-South wrestling, and when it got to the WWF and the WCW, I kind of, by that time, when it became Rockin' Wrestling, it was MTV, and Cyndi Lauper was in it, and the guy with the rubber bands hanging off his face.
Captain Lou Albano.
My brother remembers the dude. There is Captain Lou Albano. And I could never understand how he had rubber bands hanging from his face, but he had rubber bands hanging from his face.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he was a unique gentleman.
Well, yeah, a lot of people's grandmas watch wrestling. You watch old Mid-South. If they ever show that, you'd always have those little old ladies in the front seat. Kill him! Kill him! So, anyway, my brother, he was into it. And, of course, they had all the magazines out back then. So, he would go out, we both went to De La Salle High School in New Orleans. And my dad would take us to work on his way to work in the morning because he worked downtown. But we had to ride the streetcar and the public bus on the way home out to the suburbs. So anyway, my brother would stop at the K&B, the streetcar line on on Carrollton would end at Claiborne. All right, so we rode the streetcar all the way to the end of Claiborne, and then you waited for the Kennelocal bus. to come up and pick you up. Okay. You're right, Jerry. So anyway, you had usually anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour waiting for that bus to come. So we go in K&B. Oh yeah, I didn't get home till 4:30, 5 o'clock back then. I hated it. The public bus was a who's who of mental illness. I'm telling you, I hated riding that thing. You had your schizophrenias, you had your bipolar people, manic depressives, you had it all. You had it all. It was a perfect cut through of the insane people who ride public transit. One guy would spit on himself. One guy would yell, argue with himself. Oh my God, it was insane. So anyway, so while you're waiting for the bus, you go to K&B, and K&B had a huge selection of magazines, including the dirty magazines. But the dirty magazines were behind the counter; you couldn't get them. So I go buy News on Wheels, like every teenage kid would buy. But I was like, skipping lunch, so I had money to spend on. I had my dollars spent on News on Wheels, and excuse me, my my brother started buying a wrestling magazine. Now these suckers like $3 a piece. That's all pictures, okay? He's coming home with Wrestling Illustrated, WWF, all kinds of magazines. And I'm going, how are you buying these things? Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Because I know he ate. If you see my brother, he ate. He got awful food at De La Salle. He ate. Well, he played football too. He was on the defensive line. So when he got to be a junior in high school, he was a little kid. And then he had his growth spurt junior in high school. And his foot went from like a size 7 to like a size 13 or 15 extra wide. I used to tell him, just throw the shoes out and wear the boxes because, that's where they're going to fit your feet. So anyway, so he starts buying these magazines. I'm going, how are you affording this? Oh, don't worry about it. Now, I had a job. He didn't because he was playing football. I come to find out every week, a period, my dad, he started this in the 70s when it wasn't that common for wives to have credit cards. He used to leave money in an envelope in the back, my parents' dresser, the back dresser. So my mom had money to go to the grocery store and run errands. Anything she had to buy, she had cash for because she didn't have credit cards. And back then, people didn't take checks everywhere. So anyway, come to find out, yeah, that's it. Inside Wrestling, Wrestler, PW. Yeah, I know you know.
Pro Wrestling Illustrated.
Yep. So anyway, I find out later after my brother graduated and went to college. I'm already at college, but when my brother graduated and went to college, my dad realizes my mom never went anywhere, didn't spend that money, but the money in that back was always empty. So he's like, who's spending that money? My brother said, oh, I am. On what? Well, he was buying food and he was buying these wrestling magazines. He says, oh, that's the house money. So that's not the house money. That's mom's money. So, yeah. So that was my brother buying all those. I mean, you should see he had boxes of these things.
Yeah.
And it's just, he ripped the posters out and put them up on his wall and everything else. So, yeah, he was huge into wrestling. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the kid. That's the kid you need on this show for wrestling.
Okay.
Anyway,
boy, we got way off though.
We always do. We always do. Well, yeah. Like I said, we were talking about what free agents to bring in. And I'm sorry, I'm yelling because I'm worried people can't hear me over the background noise that comes up, comes down. But, again, I think the problem with bringing in free agents is the same issue we were talking about earlier with bringing in people who have to learn a new system without having the benefit of an OTA or training camp. Do, however, think the Saints need to bring in a couple more people. I think they need to bring in a cornerback. I think they need to bring in um, some extra veteran wide receivers. We've talked about those things. Oh, you do hear it's good, good, good. It's my headphones. I can really hear that background conversation. I can hear kind of what people are saying. But as long as you guys can hear me without yelling, that's good. That's good. I know my wife's probably like, why are you yelling like that? Anyway, so I think they do look at that. I think that's part of the reason why the Saints also did not draft as many players is because they like the roster the way it's constructed right now. There's not a whole lot of openings on this team. I think they're looking at other guys as, okay, if we have injuries in training camp or injuries during the season, these are the guys we'll bring in.
Yeah, as we've alluded to in the past couple of weeks, top to bottom, the Saints probably have one of the most solid, as in not really a lot of holes to fill going into the draft. That's the reason that you didn't see them mortgage the future to try to get a player that stood a 25% chance on making the roster anyway.
Yeah.
You just want to capitalize on what you have in-house already.
I know a lot of people want to bring in Jadeveon Clowney or Everson Griffin, and part of me would like to take one of those guys off the market just to keep the team like the Falcons or the Seahawks from getting them, because you're looking at those guys, your number one competition. But like Logan Ryan, Jadeveon Clowney's looking for a big payday, even if it's for a 1-year deal. You can't afford him. No, but
the reality is going to click with him shortly. That if he don't alter his demands, he's going to be unemployed, and that you're going to see that figure come down. I truly believe that.
And I agree. I count Clowney is overrated because Clowney has made his living off of very few plays. You look at that.
He made a living off of the fact that he played the bookend to J.J. Watt.
Well, I'm going back. I'm going all the way back to college too. He made that one huge play.
Yeah.
Excuse me, that Sports Center play that shot him up draft boards. Then he had that in Seattle against the 49ers where he was just taking over and destroying the 49ers left tackle. But you don't get that consistent play out of it. You get a game like that. You don't get a whole season of him played that level. He's not Cam Jordan. You get flashes, and that's why Houston got tired of him. That's why Seattle isn't that anxious to spend a lot of money on him. Everson Griffin, on the other hand, would be an interesting addition as a rotational player because clearly Davenport is your starter. You're not going to bench Cam Jordan, obviously. But I think Everson Griffin is an upgrade to Hendrickson. But the problem you have with him is he's going to cost you more money than Hendrickson will.
Well, I can't see him bringing in any defensive linemen, especially some like a Clowney or a Griffin that you're going to have to pay a lot for, because as it goes, that's a pretty crowded position room as it stands right now.
Yeah,
and what you're eventually going to be spending for a Jordan, a Davenport,
but I understand what you're saying. Jordan, you're paying Jordan a lot of money. You're going to pay Rankins money. Because we're not going to let him go. You're paying Malcolm Brown money. Malcolm Brown was an upgrade to Tyler Davidson. And you really need to see what you got with Davenport. He needs to play. So starting defensive line, you know what? Yeah, I want to be a rotational backup to these guys. I'm just not. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So yeah, my excuse me, my thing would be if you guys you talk about bringing in maybe linebackers, defensive tackles. You're going to be bringing in cornerbacks and receivers. That's where. Thank you for joining us, EJ. That's where you're going to see if any free agents come in. That's when they're going to come in.
I agree.
Um,
Specific needs, not like just an open curtain call.
I mean, you brought Austin Carr back. That's why I got my Austin Carr jersey on. Austin Carr back. Yeah, no, this is Jimmy Graham. Sorry. But oh, you got your Marcus Colston jersey? I got you.
Yeah. What's left of it?
Yeah. Well, you that's why you brought a guy like Austin Carr in, because he's a guy, once again, that knows the system, and you can play him in a pinch. And people were like, why are you wasting your time with that? Again, COVID-19, and you don't know how this is going to play out. You got to bring in as many veteran players or players that know your system as best you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's how you have to look at all these moves the Saints have made. Even Malcolm Jenkins. Malcolm Jenkins, they brought him in not only to lead secondary, but, and granted, Malcolm Jenkins hasn't been part of this team in 5 years. But you're bringing in a guy who is familiar with your coaching staff, and he is somebody that you know what to expect out of him, what kind of play you're going to get out of him, so you can trust him. DJ Swearinger, the backup safety, you had him on your team last year. Granted, at the end of the season, but again, he's familiar with your defense. So you may lose a quality player in Von Bell, but you're really not having that learning curve of somebody brand new coming in. And that's go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, that's kind of, you have to look at every free agent move the Saints have made. And it's been with the idea of, let's keep this team as intact as we can to make one more run, especially given the kind of question marks we have this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
All right. So we've talked about the schedule. We talked about Larry Warford, and we talked about free agents. What big questions do you think you have for this team coming into the 2020 offseason? Because that's basically what we're in.
It's really hard, Alan. There's question marks coming out of last season, just like there is within the team. But the unknown factor that we're having to experience and deal with, it creates way more questions than it does answers. And it's mind-boggling when you start thinking about it. I mean, you think about the possibility of the season beginning and Saints games being played in an empty Superdome. And not just the Saints games, but all over.
I cannot imagine that happening. I just cannot see that happening.
That's not strictly my 2 cents. That's not football to me. I would support it. I would support my team, obviously, but that is not National Football League product to me at all.
Well, I watched. I read a story the other day. They were talking about bringing back baseball after July 4th, and start implementing games. You won't have what do they call it? Interleague play. Yeah, you won't have interleague play. They're going to try and keep it all the American and all National League teams. You're probably going to have a hitter in both. These are just things that are floating out there. Limited travel. So, you're kind of staying, I guess, close to each other, playing with no fans in the stadiums. College football is talking about And this again goes back to California and the power California is having by doing these decisions. The NCAA is saying if they're not all in, we may not have any fall sports because if California decides we're going to do all online learning and no fall sports, that means no college football games. That means no pro football games either in California. So, that's the kind of things that really are shaping what's going to happen next year. And then how does the league respond to that? Because I can't see the NFL being dictated to like that. I think the NFL, and I sound like I got coronavirus because I'm coughing all the time, but it's because I'm talking so. I cannot see the NFL letting a state like California dictate to them when you're going to have your season. I think at worst, they decide that, hey, what we're going to do is we'll wait till October, start the season in October, just so the California teams can play. If that doesn't happen, then I can see them telling those teams, well, you know what? 49ers, Rams, and Chargers, y'all going to have to play in other stadiums, in other cities.
Sure.
Empty stadiums, but you're going to be playing games in other cities.
And there's actually precedent for that. I mean, look at the Saints during the aftermath of Katrina.
Exactly. That's
you
how
start
they were treated.
You start messing with the money press that the National Football League is, and people are going to affect change real quick.
Yep. Yeah, that's right, Chad. 87 games and a 14-team playoff system. Yep. So I've heard both proposals, and that's what I can see the NFL doing, because the NFL is not going to cancel their season. They just can't afford it.
No.
The bulk of their money comes from television anyway. They'll make money on television revenue. Hell, they may tell the Saints, you know what? We don't feel comfortable you playing in a dome. You play all your games at Yeoman Stadium. Won't be any fans there anyway. It's an open-air stadium, so it's only 20,000 seats. It's the same size as that soccer stadium the Chargers are playing out of. I can see them with no fans. You play your games at Yeoman Stadium, just an open-air stadium. That's how weird the things could be.
Yeah, and that's the biggest question mark. It's not necessarily what kind of player are we going to get out of the linebacker core this year. It's not questions like that nearly as much as it is just exactly how are we going to be able to have a season.
Right. And to me, it's going to look like practice. It's going to look like practice out there.
Controlled scrimmage.
Yeah. You're going to hear everybody talking, which will be interesting because you're going to hear all the cursing too. But you're going to hear everybody talking in the field, and the teams will be able to go up and down the field. There'll be almost no defense because, how do you do a false start? I mean, it's going to be deadly quiet out there. So,
yeah,
I'm looking forward to it, but I'm not looking forward to it. So
I'm ready for football, but once again, to me, playing in an empty stadium, that is not professional. It's not professional sports, not just football.
My thing is the best thing can happen is we've already seen it with Georgia and with Florida. They've started to open things up, and they haven't had the spike in cases. So let's see what happens as other cities start opening things up. If the curve stays flat, then we'll see. We'll see what happens. How realistic we have a next season, because everyone is looking at the Spanish flu from 1918 as kind of the blueprint for this disease. The difference is in 1918 in the fall, when that second wave came, you also had the end of World War One, where you had all these soldiers that were in Europe come home. So, so we'll see if it follows that same pattern, because we're not going to have that kind of situation like you had in 1918. So,
Sure.
not
Not to mention the advances since 1918.
oh yeah.
102 years, the advances in modern medicine. I
Well,
just
and I did a pub crawl, a historical pub crawl in the French Quarter, and it basically talked about the history of drinks in the French Quarter and how almost all the drinks that the city was known for really started out as medication for various diseases such as malaria and the flu. You know, the alcohol in it was added to make it taste better, but
yeah.
absinthe, uh, Sazerac, those drinks were basically created as medication to relieve flu-like or malaria symptoms. Malaria, as the guy told me, and it is true, malaria comes from the term bad air, malaria. And hell, at the turn of the century, they were shooting cannons into the swamp because they thought the bad air from the swamp was was the reason that people were getting sick. So you really had cannonballs being shot into the swamp to break up that bad air. So in 1918, we weren't that much more advanced. They really didn't understand what was making people sick. What they knew, it was airborne, but they couldn't tell how it was being transmitted from one person to the other. The first flu vaccines weren't developed until the 1940s. So, that's all things that are so different from the Spanish flu compared to the Kung flu or the China flu or the COVID-19 or the Rona, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Well, that about covers everything tonight.
I think so. I mean, that's why I'm really not tied into that whole pattern of the Spanish pandemic. So anyway,
I ain't scared.
Yeah, well, we'll just keep plugging away. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Sean, you have any last words you want to say?
Thank you guys for joining us on Under the Dome. I invite you to subscribe to our show on iTunes and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at Under the Dome Podcast. Do that, baby.
Yeah. And you see both of our Twitter handles down there. And of course, we're on Facebook. Next week we'll talk some more Saints stuff, whatever Saints news there is. Very little trickling out right now, but in the meantime, we might break into a couple of games and just see matchup strength on strength. We'll start with Tampa Bay. Then we'll go into Atlanta and Carolina, who's going to bring up the rear in the division, and see how we match up with those new rosters. We'll talk about it next week, but everybody was acting like Tampa is the new place to go to. I want to really tackle the issues with Tampa and why I don't buy into the hype.
I don't either.
And we'll talk about all that next time. Thank you guys for joining us. And we'll see you next time and hopefully a quieter version of Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.